and welcome to another episode of the South African Spies podcast. Today in the Bramdo Bites segment, we are going to be delving into a topic that stirs a lot of interesting conversation, and that is religion. So for this topic, obviously I've got Mickey with me. Hi Mickey.
Hello.
The reason that this topic is brought up so much for both of us and to us and with us is obviously because of our stances when it comes to religion. So to explain that a bit more, it's also the reason that we chose to have two weddings, and that's because we both have very different religious beliefs. I, for one, am currently Tamil practicing, but my mother follows Islam, and my biological father is Christian, but also in my family, everybody's kind of, a little bit of everything. And for you?
I'm an atheist. I am very much a non-believer in God, higher powers, and all of that sort of thing. I grew up in a Tamil-ish family, but there's also a lot of Christian influences and other influences because we went around family a lot from friends and stuff that exposed me to multiple religions. But I think, I agree with you. It's an interesting conversation. It's one I'm excited to talk about because I don't get the chance because it's taboo to bring up religion amongst people in conversation. Apparently, I've always been told don't do it. Stay away from the topic.
I think for you though, it's even more so not a topic that you bring up because your belief system is so different as an atheist.
Yeah, I felt like I kind of had to come out a bit to everyone. I don't think everyone kind of has accepted my stance on religion, where they're a bit closed off to, oh, you can't be an atheist, you must have some sort of belief.
Yeah, I feel like that's also quite imposed on. But let's start unpacking this, right? So first, let's start off with maybe talking about how we kind of both grew up, because we did have a lot of religious influence in our lives and in our homes. So did you grow up in a particularly staunch religious household?
I wouldn't say staunch religious household. My grandfather and grandmother were very much practicing Tamil, although my grandfather didn't believe in going to a temple or any of the sort. He believed in you do what you need to do at home and keep your heart pure, kind of. That was his stance on religion. So because of my grandfather, we were never forced to embrace the religion to the full extent of you have to do certain things and be diligent, and we had a lot of freedom of not taking part. My father was Hindi, although I only found this out much later in life, and I only found out pretty much before meeting you, or actually after meeting you, that it was a thing, that Hindi and Tamil is very different. I didn't understand that. For me, Hindu was all one religion because I was never focused on what the religion entailed or what it had to offer and the differences between Gujarati, Hindi, Tamil, and whatever else there is.
So you basically just grew up with the belief or the premise that you should be a good person and do the right thing, as opposed to having religion be that guidance towards that?
Yes, I didn't feel like I needed that kind of guidance because if you met my grandfather, you would see all the good stuff that he did without it being in the name of a temple and in the name of religion. He did it because he needed to do good for himself. He still was very strict on himself when it came to fasting on a Monday, and that was no matter what, he would do that. And he would pray in our own personal prayer room at home on the special occasion days and that kind of stuff. But he was never, as I would see other people who take part in the religion, where, every big prayer they go to the temple and make offerings and that kind of thing. My grandmother used to go and do that, but not him. But that being said, a lot of our family, especially when I was younger, my cousins were Christian, and I saw a lot of that influence. And because we were not extremely religious people, and the Christian family that we had were very religious, they would go to church, Sunday school, extra church events. Their friends were all from the church. So I would always assume we were non-religious people because you see the religious people and so extreme that just meant to me that we don't do those kind of things.
And then you also grew up in a very Jewish area.
Yes, I grew up in I think it was 90% Jewish area when I was younger and less now, but still very Jewish. you would see the people walking in the streets because they couldn't use their cars and stuff. And I had Jewish friends where I would go over on Sabbath days, and you wouldn't be able to have certain things like, I think you can't have yeast in your bread, so it has to be flatbreads and that kind of stuff. And because I didn't have a yarmulke, they would put a napkin on my head because so you have to cover your hair.
So you would like follow some of those customs as you got exposed to it when you were visiting?
Yeah.
Out of respect.
As a respect, you in someone else's house, and they would tell me this is how we do it, and you obey.
And if they ever came to your house during those times, was it the same, or did they never come?
We never really hosted prayer days, so I can't see it being a thing. At most, I would see the one friend that I mentioned was really close to me when I was growing up. He would come over for Diwali, but that was just to watch the fireworks. It was not to like observe the actual practices of Diwali. Also, because I didn't know what it was. It was just the day we, lit fireworks.
Okay, that makes sense. I think that it does make a lot of sense because you grew up in an area where you weren't really exposed to it, and without having so much of family in Joburg. And I think your mom had to do what she needed to do to kind of help you all adapt better in the surrounding, as opposed to forcing you all to do a lot of things.
Yeah. And I think it's also like, I see it because our friends are not into Bollywood movies and stuff, obviously, whereas someone who grew up in a more Indian area, their friends are watching these things and they get exposed to the ways of doing things through that. Like, I've only seen some of the stuff that we're supposed to do when watching movies with you now recently.
But those are Hindi movies.
But still,
yeah, Tamil.
But still, you would show me and say, this is how they do that, and this is where the tradition comes from, or whatever it is. But I had no exposure to that because I didn't watch Indian TV. I didn't listen to Indian songs.
Yeah. Yeah, you didn't really have any of that exposure.
No.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that was me growing up. And then you growing up.
For me, it was very different. My mother was Tamil born. So, I did the whole episode talking about my granny and stuff. And we really, I did touch on the religious aspects or the religious beliefs that both my grandparents had growing up. They were religious in the sense that they did all the big things. My granny lit the lamp every day. She washed the lamp every week. That was a norm, that was a given. She wore her tali, she wore her dot. She did all those things, and when it came to all the prayers, she knew exactly what to do, and those were things that were really passed down. So my mother also grew up doing all those things. We were very staunch Tamils growing up. I remember when we lived in Joburg, it was just, my mom, my sister, myself, and we would actually go to temple every Friday. We would also go, I think sometimes for service and stuff, because my mother was also a Sai devotee. So naturally, we were Sai devotees.
So for someone like me, I don't know what a Sai devotee is, what it entails, and like what it means.
So yeah, that's a difficult one. I don't think I'm the right or knowledgeable person to give you that, but I didn't have much understanding because I was also very little when we did this. I just did what my mother did, obviously, like how you did what your mother did.
Yeah.
So, being a Sai devotee was following the practices of Sai Baba. And it was love all, serve all. And that was the basis of it all. And serving, like giving seva. Back. Yeah, and that was seva. That's what I really understood from it. I think the part I didn't understand about it was that I felt that it was worshipping a person, a living person in India. And I didn't understand that concept. But, my mother was into it. I liked the teachings. And we did everything that way. So, we were Tamils, we were Sai devotees. We were very strict and stuff. We lived in Braamfontein and we used to go to temple in Azadville. And I remember so clearly, I was about 7 because my sister was about 17 and she got trance for the first time at the temple. And I remember many Fridays when we would drive home and the cops would stop us because it was so late at night. Temple would finish after midnight or so and we'd be driving home, just the 3 of us. And this is driving into Braamfontein. So the cops would stop us under that bridge. And, my mother would say, but my friend, I did nothing wrong. Wearing my seatbelt, everything is fine. Look at me. I came from the temple. I prayed for you.
Okay.
And it was just it's one of those memories, those core memories that kind of stick out for me. But that was our life every Friday. And it continued to be that way until we moved into Florida. My mom bought a flat. We did an egyo, like a house prayer in the flat, which was, I don't think we were allowed to, but she did it because it's a oven, like an actual fire.
Yeah, you see, that's another thing that I was never exposed to because we lived in the same house my mother's still living in that house. So there was never a movement to then trigger those kind of things.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, we did it, but those are things I didn't really think about as being, oh, this is religious. For me, it was all just normal. It was part of life. Like, I knew there was something that needed to be done. And yeah, we did that, and that's how we were for a while. But in addition to that, because I also wasn't in an Indian community, I had a lot of friends that were Christian. I had neighbors that were Christian. I had, some people who were Muslim that I went to school with, but I was always very curious. So I made friends with a girl who lived 4 blocks down. She was much older than me. I think I was in primary school and she was like already almost finishing high school, but she was very involved in the church and she would go to youth on a Friday. And eventually I was like, Mom, I want to go to see what it's about. And I went. And that's how I got my exposure, or my first exposure to different religion. And that was youth. It was going to church on a Sunday. Then there was somebody who was like Catholic, a friend. And I was like, I want to go and see what that is about and, just like understand. And I think that really like broadened my mind to religion itself. And I really enjoyed learning. It didn't put me off anything. It didn't take me away from my religion. I felt that I was being better to myself by understanding more.
I can understand that. I can also understand the want to like go to youth and stuff, because I remember speaking to my friends and they would say, oh, we're going to youth on Wednesday or Thursday or whatever it was, and we're doing this and that, and there's a concert, and it sounded like the most epic, amazing, fun times to go to. And I also had friends that would come, I met a girl at youth, and so it kind of was like this hangout for teenagers that I wasn't never allowed to be a part of, because obviously I'm not Christian, so I don't go with them to these kind of things.
Were you not allowed to go because you
No,
were
it's not that I
Christian,
wasn't allowed. I'm sure if I asked my mother to go, I would have been allowed to go. But for me, it felt that's their religion. I'm not religious. Why? Like, I don't belong.
Ah, okay. For me, it was the opposite. I felt very welcomed. And, when I would go to youth and I'd go to like some of the classes and the teachings and stuff, the minute people knew that I was not Christian, they were more open to me asking questions and trying to explain things. And then this journey with religion for me kind of continued, because when I was in grade 5 and my mom remarried, that's when she married and converted to Islam. And it was like an overnight switch. But I was also in this phase where I was just learning about religion, and, we were in such diverse classes and it was such a big deal. I think that year I also had a really good teacher. She was, also very Christian, would read us a scripture every morning. She used a lot of like godly practices in her teaching. It never felt too much, but she was also very open to anybody else wanting to share their own. So from a religious perspective, we all felt very free and open and in like a really good environment to share our own beliefs and to educate and encourage others to learn and to ask questions and stuff like that. So I think because of that space, when my mother converted, I was ecstatic. This was like the best thing that could have happened, because it was like, oh my gosh, there's a new religion. I can learn about it, I can ask questions, I can understand it a bit better. And so I actually converted, or what I thought was me converting. And I say this because I was a child. My mother was very new to the religion, so she was doing things that she was obviously advised on by her new husband.
And when you say converted, what did that entail? Like, what did you actually do?
I changed my name. So I went from being Alisha Mikhail to Aisha Al-Said Ahmed Damit Abdul Azab.
Which was all your stepfather's surnames.
Yeah, it was like all his 4 names.
Yeah.
And we literally changed that even on my birth certificate, and I got a new passport with that. But we didn't actually change the name at school, or I had a bank account, we didn't change it there. Nothing of that sort, but that was my legal name. And I started doing and practicing everything the Islamic way.
And because your stepfather was Egyptian, it was more the Egyptian Islamic way. It wasn't... Is there a difference?
I don't know. I haven't been exposed to enough to know that there is a difference, but from my understanding, most of it is, very much the same. Like, You read the Quran. You pray 5 times a day. You pray the same way. I went to the mosque with the other Muslims in Mayfair because that was the mosque that allowed for women to go into the mosque, obviously separately to men. And I did that. But my school was very confused by this because that first year that I did it, I was so strict and staunch and I wanted to do it right. So everything I learned, I did properly. And I would literally pray 5 times a day to the point where I took my prayer mat to school to pray. And my teacher was brilliant. She would literally get the whole class to be quiet because I needed to pray. I didn't do this the whole year, but I did it during Ramadan, and that was my first Ramadan. I fasted the whole month of Ramadan. It was amazing. It was beautiful. Also in grade 5, I had, I think I had my highest number of absent days because on a Friday, the school wouldn't let me leave with the other Muslim children because they didn't know me for being Muslim. They knew me for being Hindu. So I would be off for Diwali and that was an accepted holiday. But I wasn't allowed to leave school early on a Friday to go to mosque because they were like, but you're not Muslim. They didn't understand the situation that my mother had converted, and so did I. And I wanted to go. So instead I was like, well, I'm just going to stay at home on a Friday. So that's what I did. I stayed at home every Friday so that I could go to mosque. And my mother did everything, the Islamic way as well, which wasn't incredibly different. It just meant that her Tamil practices had stopped and there were obviously certain lifestyle changes that she made. She also changed her name legally and to this day goes by that name.
Because the rest of your family is still now Tamil and such, all the practices, I'm sure, didn't fall away. I'm sure you still got together with family for Diwali and stuff because they were celebrating.
So it was never a case where, my mother was like, okay, I'm Muslim now, so I don't want anything to do with, anything else. Because at the end of the day, my sister was still a practicing Tamil. While I was practicing Islam, she never said to me, okay, this is now what you have to do for the rest of your life. She always left us with the choice of choosing for ourselves and making our own informed decisions. For her, as long as we did something, she was happy. But more importantly, as long as we understood what we were doing was the even bigger thing and we felt comfortable and right doing it. And yeah, we would be with family and friends for other occasions, whether it was prayer days or Diwali or anything like that, or even if distant family had passed away and we would have to go for those kind of prayers and funerals and perform certain rituals and prayers there, those things would be done.
So you mentioned there that your mother said, well, not that she said, but it was implied that as long as you were doing something for yourself, then it would be okay no matter what it was. Does that mean there was like a feeling of I have to have a religion?
No, because I practiced Islam for 3 years and afterwards I felt a bit lost. So my mother converted to Islam and immediately felt this was her pull, this was where she was meant to be, this was meant for her, and she felt very at peace within herself and she stuck to it. So even though she initially converted because of marriage, that's where she belonged. She found where she needed to be. After the 3 years, I went through my own kind of stuff, I guess, and I stopped believing in anything and everything. And for a couple of years, I didn't do anything. I didn't fast. I didn't go to temple. I didn't go to church. I stopped going to mosque. I stopped practicing absolutely everything. And my mother never pushed me to say, well, you have to do something. She kind of just let me figure it out on my own. And I did. So whatever I was doing, as long as it was my choice, was fine for her. As I went through those phases, I eventually got to a point where I ended up at Kavadi one year. I enjoyed the feeling of it, but it was also at that point I realized that I needed to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because that was the one thing I didn't appreciate about religion, was that you're told to do something, but when you ask why, there isn't a valid reason as to why or what it means, or, it's always just because we've done it this way or because you have to. And that didn't feel right.
Yeah, I agree, because that kind of steers towards how I ended up becoming an atheist, right? So we can get more into that a bit later, but basically for me, it feels like everything we do as religious practices doesn't come from a source of higher power. It comes from a source of he said, and go back as far as you can until okay, it's 1,000 years old, it must be true. But is that really the case? And that's what kind of played on me going down the path of, where does that stop and where does it get to a God that passed this knowledge down? And because you can never find that source. And that's what led me to atheism. That's the basic version of what led me to atheism. Because you're mentioning, like, your mother was obviously taught by somebody to do these practices. And I can get that feeling like my mother would tell us to do certain things. But then she got that from her mother. And she, in turn, got that from her mother. But at some point, everyone makes mistakes, and they pass down these mistakes through the religions, or
not
mistakes,
misunderstandings.
Deviations to the religion. Then what is actually the truth?
I think realistically speaking, I understand, what you mean, but I've also come to the realization that unless there's a time machine invented, we can't go back to actually know the truth. And that's why my decision when it comes to religion has grown to become that I need to do what I feel comfortable with in terms of what I understand. And that's been my basis for everything. So while I am a practicing Tamil, I don't know if anybody would consider me staunch. I don't know if I would consider me staunch because I don't blindly do things. I don't blindly follow every rule, regulation, etc. Or, whatever the elderly person would say you have to do and you must do. I want to understand why. Like, I got the understanding of why we carry kavadi, and it has such a great importance to me now. So every year, even if I'm not carrying kavadi, it is the time of the year that I look forward to the most. And I want to fast as a person who does not like vegetables. Still, it's still like the time that I want to fast. My birthday is the start of Patasi. Obviously, as a child, was never happy with that because on my birthday, every year I had to eat vegetables. But as I grew up and I understood, the meaning behind Patasi, and I know there's a lot of that's a whole nother story on its own, but I guess for me, that's the month I choose to make my sacrifice and to, give up the meat and stuff. But I do think there's a lot of things I have taken from like my grandfather and even kind of your grandfather's beliefs is that, and a lot of people I know in the Hindu community, I've seen these comments on like the groups and stuff that people don't agree with this, that just being a good person is enough. But that is my belief. My belief is that if I'm doing things with a good intention and a pure heart, that should matter more than what I actually do. Because my logic is that, and this comes to any religion, you could go to church every Sunday. You could go to temple every week. You could pray and fast. You could even be vegetarian. You could do all these things. You could go to the mosque every Friday. You can fast staunchly for Ramadan. But when you are mistreating people and when you are doing horrible things to other people and you're being nasty, and it doesn't even mean physically hurting somebody else, but when you are mentally, emotionally just being nasty to other people, making comments, not helping where you can, or not helping unless you can show it off, then to me that defeats the whole point.
Or saying you're a good religious person, therefore you must be a good person.
Yeah, exactly. Like for me, being a good person is more than what you do religiously.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I have to agree. I'm an atheist. But touching on the fasting stuff and, you say it makes you feel good. And I can 100% agree with that. And from a non-religious point of view. And I think a lot of fellow atheists will concur with me. But we did a few days ago where we want to give up sugar, and that's sugar added in everything, just because we want to challenge ourselves for one, make sure that we can keep discipline, and then just to make our bodies feel better. And for me, it's the same thing as giving up meat once a week or for a month or whatever it is. It's that challenge of, can I be disciplined and can I do something that's good for my health for an extended period of time to make me feel good and release endorphins when I, complete a challenge. I think that for me falls outside of religion, whereas a lot of people like yourself feel it in the religion. I feel it outside of religion, but I think it's equal on feeling. It's just I don't attribute it to a religious practice.
Yeah, and that's just because my reasoning is obviously a religious reasoning that
Yes.
I do it for.
Yes.
So that would be why
Yeah.
we don't attribute it to the same things.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think the feelings that we get from that is probably very similar. But I would also say, even when it comes to the fasting stuff, I fast on a Monday. I fast for all the main days, like, Ganesha prayer and Lakshmi prayer and Saraswati prayers and like all of that. I fast for Kaveri and I fast for Shivratri and I fast for Pratasi. But the Monday fast specifically, because every other day that I fast for any of those other days, I generally feel a very strong sense of faith within, where I don't crave the meat. It's not a thought. It's not like oh, oopsie, I'm going to put something in my mouth, or, oh, I can't wait for this day to be over type of thing. But Mondays, I'm usually quite good with it. But there are Mondays that I make my own leeway for it. I give myself leeway for it.
Yeah.
Like your birthday is coming up and it's on a Monday. You've requested... What did you request?
Biryani.
What biryani? Chicken biryani.
Chicken biryani.
So you requested chicken biryani. Now I'm not going to sit there and watch you eat chicken biryani when it's one of my favorite things. I know it's your birthday. It's a special
Plus
occasion.
there'll be cake and egg in the
Exactly. So there's certain times like that I will make it. But I don't think that because I broke my fast that day, it makes me a bad person. I find that I feel worse off as a person when I'm fasting on a Monday and all I can think about is that piece of chicken that I want to have, or everything smells like Nando's, or whatever it is, and I'm forcing myself to just get through the day. I feel that is not, it's not with pure intention that I'm fasting on that day.
That brings me to a different kind of point, and this goes to your Monday fasting particularly, is we've kind of learned to listen to your body a bit more. For both of us, we've kind of learned that. And when you're craving the protein, it's because your body needs the protein. Mm. And sometimes we just don't have the means of the protein supplements because it's not in our diet regularly. And therefore you need to have it. And we've learned to put our health ahead of a religious practice for the sake of our health. And I find it very conflicting when I've seen people do things detrimental to their health and well-being, and even to the health and well-being of their children and family members, based on the fact that they have to do something for the religion. And that just doesn't make sense to me. Why would your higher power that you're serving want you to suffer in a way that might put you in hospital or worse?
So are you talking about a particular situation that you witnessed?
Yeah. So when I was young, there was a child that got knocked on our road just outside our house. And they were trying to call his parents to come and respond because he was dying. He had got hit. It was quite serious. And they refused to answer the phone because it was against their religion to answer the phone on that day. And the child ended up passing. And that was just something they accepted because religion came first, and they would refuse to answer the phone and refuse to make phone calls to go and call an ambulance and get help.
That's hectic.
That is hectic.
But again, us as two people who believe differently will see that as something that, we wouldn't do.
Of course.
But
that's the extreme cases of...
Yeah, that's the extreme cases of where that could happen. But at the same time, I also respect the fact that, you have to just respect the fact that those are people's beliefs and those are, the decisions that they make for themselves and will be fine to live with those consequences. You and I sitting here just not a chance would we do that. And I think especially, you spoke about our eating and stuff, and we have felt it because we're obviously, trying to conceive. So our diet has played a bigger role in our lives now than it has previously. And that's why I felt more affected by, not eating meat. But it's also because I'm so skimpy on the vegetables that I do eat that I've struggled to find what I need from it. Yeah,
especially living abroad from South Africa now, where our diet is so important to keep up with the nutrients. I think we underestimate how much balance we get in South Africa, even through junk food, whereas it's not the case elsewhere.
Yeah.
And because of that, we need to be very careful with, for example, September coming up again, when you do the fast, that we keep enough protein and all the other nutrients that you need.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. So let's get back to kind of understanding where you're at now and where I'm at now in terms of religion. So you've mentioned that you're an atheist. Can you explain to us exactly what that means?
Okay, so Ricky Gervais was actually someone who put it into nice words for me that explains it really well to a lot of people. And it kind of points at the Christian religion. And when you ask someone who's Christian, who do they believe in? They'll obviously say Jesus and Yahweh or whatever it is. And that's their one true God. And then he mentioned, okay, but there's 5,000 plus other gods that you don't believe in. And they say, yes, I don't believe in those. And he says, okay, then I just don't believe in one more God than you, which is your God. And that's kind of where I am. It's the belief that there is no God. There is no higher power. It is unknown as to what created the universe, why the universe was created, how all of that stuff is unknown. And I think it's unfair to just attribute it to something from ignorance. And that's kind of where I am.
So that's your feeling towards it?
That is my feeling towards it. And actually, there's a lot of science behind it. And a lot of the scientists will point to the maths doesn't math before time zero. So to say what existed before the Big Bang is actually a non-question, because the math says nothing existed before the Big Bang. Time didn't exist. So until there is some explanation, I won't be believing in a religion or a higher power.
Okay, fair. I mean, my belief is honestly each to their own. If you want to believe completely, wholly, blindly in something, then that's on you. If you want to not believe in anything, that's also on you. My biggest thing when it comes to religion is whatever your beliefs are, do not try and inflict that on me or tell me how and what to believe in myself.
I 100% agree.
That's my stance. And I am a practicing Tamil. I do things. I like things explained to me. Yes, it's part personality, but also I feel that once I understand what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, why I'm doing it, it has a lot more meaning and I feel more of a spiritual connection. So that is why when I want to do a prayer, or if a prayer comes up, I will constantly ask, what does it mean? And with all that questioning, I've been able to understand that Hinduism is based a lot on symbolism. That makes sense to me. So I can understand symbolically we do a lot of things. There are certain things I don't agree on. Like I've, seen a lot of the times that you have to spend X amount of money for a prayer to be deemed right. That I don't agree with, because in my mind and the God I believe in wants you to do things with the right intention within your means. I think I'm working on kind of just understanding for myself the differences between what was done back then because of circumstances versus what was actually wrong or what is actually wrong in the religion. For example, the fact that we get told as women that when you have your period, you're not allowed to wash your lamp, you're not allowed to go into the temple and stuff like that. For me, that rationalization comes because back then, women didn't have sanitary wear. Yes, you were bleeding everywhere. Obviously, that is unsanitary to walk around, especially in a temple, and have blood everywhere, right? But now in this day and age where we have sanitary wear and you are able to have a bath just before you go and just after and all of that, I feel it's very unfair to get told as a woman, you're dirty, you can't do this. Because I always said, what happened if I had my period on our wedding day? The wedding ceremony is a prayer. Then are you telling me I can't get married on this day? But yet that's a date and time that we found based on astrology that was the right time for us to get married. But now because I've got my period, which is a natural thing that the body does, God himself created my body this way. Now for somebody to say it's dirty is just something very unfair to me. So those kind of like things I'm trying to decipher for myself, where I stand with it. I think those things for me are very much individual beliefs and everybody has to kind of like decide on their own. I'm also a believer that what I eat doesn't determine whether I'm a good human being or not. I'm also a believer that how many times I go to a temple does not determine whether I am a good human being or not. Well, in this instance, where we are, there are no temples around. The closest temple is 2.5 hours away. And the temples here are not what like we used to in South Africa. So I would need to actually go back to South Africa to get to a temple. But I wash my lamp in my house. I pray in my house. Our dogs pray with us or with me in the house. That's enough for me. That is like for me where the Lakshmi sits.
I obviously respect that because it's doing what you feel is right and good, but it's also not imposing on anyone else. It's just for you and contained to your beliefs and you figuring it out based on what you think is right.
Yeah, and I mean, I also grew up very much like, it was so surprising when we met because both our grandfathers would say the same thing. You could pray in your toilet, and if your heart is clean, your prayer will be heard.
Yeah.
And for me, that's something that like really stuck out because my grandfather would always say, you could pray anywhere. You could be anywhere. You don't have to be in a temple to do it.
But I think also the one thing that both our grandfathers and you've now adopted is you're okay to be wrong. This religion thing, if you one day pass on and find out, oh, you were way off the mark, this is not the God that I prayed to or whatever it is, you're okay with that because you're doing it for you, not for, oh, I need to get 100% on this exam.
I'm not doing it for society.
Exactly.
I'm not doing it for the aunties.
Yeah.
I'm doing it for myself and I'm doing what makes me feel good and what makes me feel spiritually enlightened.
Yes.
And that's just how it is. I mean, the house we grew up in as well, my nephews have done everything always. They've also asked questions. They have broadened their own minds and they've come to terms with where they feel they belong most. And we have to just respect that. So yeah, I think that's kind of where my line is that let me do what I believe in. You are nobody to judge me. I will not impose on you and you will not impose on me. And that was, I know, a very big part of our conversation on our very first date.
I think it precedes our first date even because when we made our dating profiles, it was something that we both acknowledged needed to be thought out before making an announcement as to what we are. And also, I know for you on the searching end, what you were looking for as the religious view was something you actually looked into on the profiles.
I did, but not like, I mean, I did, but I also like didn't because at the same time I did swipe for you and you had atheist on your profile.
Yeah, not to say that you looked for a match, you just looked for...
It was something I noticed.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that also stems from the religious aspects in past relationships that have played an impact on me.
Yeah, I can say the same, as in not to say that I wouldn't date a certain religion. It's just the announcement of being atheist is not well received.
Yeah, and there's this constant, I think, you've probably had this constant thing where like, no, I can change him. I can convert him.
Well,
I can make him.
I can give you a story.
Give us a story.
Okay, let's go into story time. So it was a New Year's Eve party, New Year's Day party that I went to with my ex-girlfriend. We were already on the rocks a bit. And I remember we went to this party. It was friends of ours. They were Christian-ish and my ex-girlfriend was Christian. And I remember her telling everyone at the party, oh, Mikhail he's now found the Lord and he's going to follow the ways of Christianity. And I was sitting there and I remember thinking to myself, at no point did I make this announcement. At no point did I make an admission of the sort. And
Did you even have a conversation?
We didn't even have a conversation. And actually, from before that, and still to this day, I'm subscribed to the Atheist Experience and the Thinking Atheist and a lot of other channels on YouTube of the sort, and regularly watch their videos. So it was kind of someone making a decision for me, which is a very much lack of respect for who I am. And just that imposing of my religion on someone else is just what put me off religion as a whole.
So obviously, because I know this backstory, I'm going to ask, do you think like your ex-girlfriend got this idea in her head because you were going to church with her?
I think so. I think sometimes the respect that I give people is misunderstood for me wanting to follow their way. Because I can very easily respect people of all religions because that is their religion and it's something that resonates within them. And that's fine because that resonance doesn't need to transfer to me.
And I think like you and my mother have that in common because even though my mother converted to Islam, and I know a lot of people have issues with this, but she also understands that she has children who follow Hinduism, and as a mother, she wants to support them. So when it's Kavri days and when it's prayer days and stuff, my mother will gladly make sure that we're all fasting in that house. She will come to Kavri, she will be there for everything because it doesn't take anything away from her as a Muslim person to show her support and to help her children do things another way. That's just not the belief system that we grew up with, no matter what religion any of us fall into. That's just not how it is. Because in the same house, we also have the fact that when my mother is fasting for Ramadan, everybody's fasting for Ramadan. You know, that's just how it is. Everybody breaks fast together. Everybody wakes up in the morning with her. Nobody eats during the day. That's just how it is. And also, when we all live together, there was never a time where there was anything not halal in that house, out of respect.
That's the one thing that I'd like to say about atheism, which is a lot of people mistake atheism for a lack of respect of the religions and think that because we're atheists now, we're going to make fun of, oh, you're a clown because of you. That's not what it is. We don't believe, and it's like any belief. If I told you, you need to believe that the sky is green, you wouldn't be able to because you can't just believe something. That's either there or it's not.
Yeah.
And atheists don't disrespect well, maybe there is some, but that's not the point of atheism, is to disrespect. So I can respect your mother, and if she's fasting, I can wish her a happy Ramadan, wish her like on Eid and all the other things, and give her the respect that she deserves when she's practicing.
Which I mean is a big thing, and I think that's one thing that has played a big part in our relationship as well. But the other thing before I get to our relationship that I wanted to talk about was the fact that, like, you know, my previous relationship, so while I never had anything as extreme as yours, I had, you know, I dated one person who was Christian, and that was very early on, but it was never, we weren't old enough to be at that point where it's like, cool, this is it, and this was a stipulation or whatever it was. But I did date other Hindus in serious relationships, but I've also met a few in the dating process. And what I didn't appreciate was this complex between being North Indian and South Indian, being Hindi and Tamil, and, oh, because you're Tamil, you'll just convert and do things my way. I was like, yeah, it all falls under Hinduism, but there are certain practices that fall under being Tamil that I want to continue and I want to carry forward. That's also where I realized that, yes, religion was important to me, but it wasn't dependent on the next person. And that's why when we met, like, things just clicked, because we both were of the opinion, you have your beliefs, I have my belief, and the biggest thing was just not imposing it on each other, but at the same time respecting each other.
Yes.
And that was, I think, a very important discussion that we had on our very first date.
That was the very first date. I think it even preceded our first date because we spoke about it on the phone leading up to a little bit.
Yeah, vaguely.
Vaguely. And I think you asked me, like, so this atheist thing on your profile, what does it mean? And then we kind of went into it a little bit. Yeah, I think the mutual respect of not trying to convert each other and understanding that is your belief. It's fine. I'm just going to roll with it for now.
And we have our boundaries also set when it comes to certain things. Like, for example, you know, a day that I'm fasting, like, I'm not going to cook the meat in the house. But if you want to have it.
That's the other side of the coin, is sometimes when we're eating vegetables on a Monday or whatever fasting day it is, and I feel, oh, I need the protein, I need the extra meat, or I'm craving it, you'll allow me to just have it as long as I'm not just like stuffing it in your face.
Yeah, but also because fasting is my choice, and if I don't have this urge to be like, oh my god, you having meat, I want one bite or whatever, then it's like,
what's the point if you're
if I'm going to be so tempted
exactly
by it, and that's really it. But then also when it came to bigger things like our weddings, so I think you were fine with just having a Tamil wedding because that was important to me and you didn't really think of a wedding. But when we really sat down and we spoke about it, we were like, the only weddings that you have been exposed to has been a non-religious white wedding. So for you, if you had to ever get married, that was what it would be.
Yeah, that was if someone had to tell me to picture a wedding in my head, that's what I would picture, just because that's the only thing I knew.
And that's what we did. So we had 2 weddings, the white non-religious wedding for the jaw, and then we had the Tamil wedding where we fasted and we did everything the right way.
Yeah. And even as an atheist, taking part in a Tamil wedding, I think you were very accommodating in letting me pick and choose what I participated in.
But also because we had a really good priest, our guru was really good and he understood. He himself, being a guru, didn't force anything on you either. He understood that what we needed was for everything to be explained, and he so openly and gladly did that we actually understood our own wedding. Me, as a Tamil person who has attended other weddings, was actually able to understand what we were doing, why we're doing it, and what it actually meant.
But he took it even one step further because we were very open with him that I don't believe in anything. So when it came time for me to do something that he knew would have been out of my comfort zone, he would just tell you to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, we did have a lot of that, and that was really nice. And I think that kind of compromise carries through with us in certain, like in a lot of things that we do, because when it comes to like Pratasi time and I fast, and then when I do that prayer on the weekend, and I'll just say to you, right, it's a prayer day. Those are the days you will do that sacrifice with me and not have meat because you understand it's a more important day for me. So if it's like one of the big fasting days, like it's Lakshmi prayers or something like that, then, you kind of fast with me. You don't do it with the same intention that I do, but you do it to support me.
I'm doing it in respect of you and your religion.
Yeah, exactly. And my way of like also my kind of compromise is that I'm not forcing you to come and stand by the lamp and pray with me and turn the camphor and like do all these things or tie a Lakshmi string and stuff like that. That's just not.
We just need to be respectful of other people's religions and beliefs, especially if it has no direct impact on us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we are gonna, discuss in like for future episodes a little bit more about our own weddings and those kind of religious aspects that we touched on now.
I think weddings and our previous relationships and where religion fell into those.
Yeah, this was just a very brief conversation on those. So yes, it's about to get more interesting. But yeah, I think my last statement to just make on it to round it off is I hope that we one day get to a point where, religion doesn't cause as much of a disaster and destruction in the world that it does, and that people can just, be kind to each other and just let people do what they feel is right for them, because that to me is the ultimate goal, is to feel content and happy in your own heart and in your own beliefs, that you feel comfortable to practice what you preach, how you preach, and to understand things the way you need to. And I think everybody will just be happier. I mean, imagine how much less stressful it would be if you didn't have to constantly...
If you didn't have to worry about 7 billion other people's beliefs.
Exactly that. And I am very much of the opinion, that the Sai teaching is right. Like, love all, serve all, give back as much as you can.
Yeah.
But within your own means.
Yeah, and I think that's why sometimes we can be very aligned, because as an atheist, I believe that as humans, we do not need a babysitter. We do not need a higher power making sure if you don't do something good, you're going to hell or you're going to suffer in the next life or whatever else you believe in. Just be good people.
Yes, and we're going to leave this conversation with that beautiful saying. So until our next episode, shop sweet and aware. Lots of love.